He was more than a performer, more than a legend, more than the purple silhouette the world thought it understood. When Prince died on that April morning in 2016, America didn't just lose an artist, it lost a piece of its heartbeat. His passing settled over the nation like a sudden eclipse, a strange aching silence that made millions pause and whisper the same impossible question. How does a man this luminous disappear? For decades, he had built an empire unlike any other, a musical kingdom of defiance, color, electricity, and genius. Over 100 million records sold, a vault of unreleased songs whispered about like buried treasure, a sprawling estate at Paisley Park that felt less like a home and more like a myth. His net worth, estimated at over $150 million, was only a number. What he truly owned was something no currency could measure: the emotional memory of a country that danced, cried, and lived through his music. Prince redefined everything he touched: music, fashion, freedom, even the idea of identity. He stood on stage in heels and fire, turning silence into thunder and rebellion into rhythm. And yet, behind the dazzling lights, the awards, the impossible talent, there was a cost, a shadow, a secret America would only understand after he was gone. Because his legacy wasn't just a collection of songs, it was a mirror reflecting who people were when his music found them. First love, first heartbreak, first dream, first loss. And that is why, when the news of his death broke, a nation wept, not only for him, but for the part of themselves that he carried. His empire was brilliant, but its final chapter was heavier than anyone imagined. He entered the world not in the glow of privilege, but in a quiet Minneapolis neighborhood where winter winds rattled old windows and music drifted through thin apartment walls like a fragile prayer. Born on June 7, 1958, Prince Rogers Nelson grew up in a household where talent was abundant, but peace was scarce. His father, John L. Nelson, a jazz pianist of great skill and even greater discipline, carried the temperament of a man who demanded perfection. His mother, Mattie Della, warm, graceful, and rhythmic, brought softness to a home often shaken by arguments and unspoken disappointments. In this world of broken melodies and bruised hopes, Prince learned quickly that sound could be both a sanctuary and a weapon. He watched his father's hands dance across the piano, creating beauty, then slammed shut the lid in moments of frustration. He listened to his mother's laughter, rising above the tension like a small lantern in a dark room. Their marriage fractured, then fell apart completely, and something inside Prince shifted with it, quietly but permanently. He was small, often lonely, and painfully aware of how unstable life could be. But where other children hid from their fears, Prince fed his into the strings of a guitar, the keys of a piano, the rhythm of a drum machine he barely knew how to use. Music became his refuge, the one place where nothing could leave him and nothing could break unexpectedly. By age 7, he was already composing simple melodies. By 13, he played instruments with the intensity of someone twice his age. By 15, he had made himself a silent oath. No matter how cold the world became, he would never again feel powerless. Minneapolis, distant from the major music scenes of Los Angeles or New York, shaped him in ways no metropolis could. Its isolation forced him to invent himself. Its quiet winters trained his discipline. Its empty streets taught him to listen to the world inside him rather than the noise outside. And in that solitude, something rare was forming: the fire of a prodigy, the resilience of a survivor, and the soul of an artist destined to change the sound of America forever. His rise did not begin with applause. It began with an empty room, a cheap guitar, and a boy who refused to accept the life that seemed prepared for him. In his late teens, Prince spent hours locked away in makeshift studios across Minneapolis, learning not just to play instruments but to command them: guitar, piano, bass, drums. He mastered them one by one until he no longer needed a band. He was the band. He was the sound. He was the storm. In 1978, at just 20 years old, he released his debut album, For You. The credits revealed an audacity the music industry had rarely seen: all instruments, all vocals, all arrangements by Prince. The public didn't fully understand him yet, But the insiders felt a tremor. Something was coming, something unruly, electric, and uncontrollable. 1 year later, Prince arrived, smooth, confident, irresistible, and suddenly the nation had no choice but to turn its head. But true ascent rarely happens in straight lines. For Prince, the ignition point came in 1980 with Dirty Mind, a daring blend of funk, punk, and pop that tore down boundaries with the force of a cultural earthquake. Critics didn't know whether to praise it or fear it. Teenagers played it in secret. Parents banned it. Radio stations hesitated. And Prince smiled because for the first time, America felt the shock of his truth. Wild, unapologetic, and absolutely new. Then came 1982, the year everything changed. 1999 wasn't just an album. It was a prophecy, a revolution wrapped in synthesizers and attitude. When he went on tour, the crowds didn't just grow, they erupted. And still, Prince was not done. 1984 carved his name into eternity. With Purple Rain, both the film and the album, he did what few artists in any era have achieved. He made himself unavoidable. When Doves Cry, Purple Rain, Let's Go Crazy. Each track was a spark, and together they formed a wildfire. The soundtrack won an Oscar. The album sold over 25 million copies, and the image of Prince standing alone in the purple mist became one of America's defining cultural imprints. And with fame came the empire. He bought Paisley Park, a sprawling 65,000 square foot complex that was part recording studio, part creative laboratory, part private world. Inside its walls, he created music at a pace few could imagine. Nights without sleep, sessions that stretched into dawn, entire albums conceived in the time it took other artists to record a single track. His collection grew. Rare guitars, custom wardrobes, archives of unreleased songs filling an underground vault so large it became legend. From the outside, it seemed effortless. The genius, the beauty, the stage presence, the godlike mastery of sound. But those closest to him knew the truth. Prince's brilliance was not born of magic. It was born of obsession, discipline, a kind of loneliness that pushed him toward perfection because anything less felt like a betrayal of the boy he had once been. His record sales soared past 100 million. His concerts became rituals. His name entered the cultural bloodstream. And all along the climb, there was a quiet distance in his eyes, as if the higher he rose, the more he understood the cost of the altitude. Still, he kept building, an empire of color and rhythm, of rebellion and grace, of music that felt eternal even in the moment it was born. But as the lights grew brighter, the shadows behind them began to lengthen. Fame had lifted him into the sky. Now it would ask its price. He had everything, yet lost what mattered most. The world saw the brilliance, the lights, the roar of the crowds, the velvet coats shimmering under purple smoke. They saw the genius who held a guitar as if it were an extension of his own heartbeat. They saw the star who could fill stadiums with nothing but a whisper. But behind the gates of Paisley Park, behind the fame that seemed weightless from the outside, Prince carried a silence heavier than any fortune he had built. For all his fire, he lived with a loneliness that fame could not cure. His relationships were fragile, brief, or broken by the very intensity that made him extraordinary. He was married twice. First to Mate Garcia, whose heartbreaking miscarriage carved a wound neither of them ever fully recovered from. Their son, born in 1996, lived only a few days. The loss shattered them, not with anger, but with a sorrow too deep for words. Prince rarely spoke about it. When he did, his voice faltered, as if the memory itself carried a weight he could barely lift. His second marriage to Manuela Testolini brought moments of peace, but even love could not quiet the storm inside him. His drive, his need for perfection, his refusal to rest, they pulled him farther and farther from the simple human connections the world assumed he enjoyed. He was surrounded by people, admired by millions, yet walked through his own home in the late hours, like a ghost searching for something he could not name. And then there were the battles. Years-long fights with record labels, control wars over ownership of his own music, the symbolic rebellion of changing his name to an unpronounceable symbol. To outsiders, it looked eccentric. To Prince, it was survival. He saw the industry as a cage disguised as a stage, a place where artists were praised publicly but stripped privately of everything that mattered: identity, autonomy, truth. The fight consumed him. Even victories left scars. The physical burden followed, touring endlessly, sleeping irregularly, living at a pace that no human body can sustain without consequences. Over time, injuries from decades of performing, jumps in heels, splits, spins, grueling rehearsals, began to haunt him. Chronic hip pain became a shadow he carried everywhere. He refused major surgery, unwilling to pause his creativity long enough to heal. Instead, he pushed through the agony, night after night, embodying a perfection his body could no longer support. Pain became a constant companion, and pain, untreated, becomes something darker. In the final years, Prince withdrew deeper into Paisley Park. He isolated himself, working alone through long nights, writing, producing, playing every instrument in rooms where silence held dominion during the day. Staff members described him as gentle, kind, but unexpectedly sad, as if something behind his eyes was slipping further away each time they saw him. The public saw occasional flashes of brilliance: a surprise performance, a stunning guitar solo, a gospel-like piano set. But beneath those moments, a quiet fear was growing. He canceled concerts, collapsed on a plane, appeared frail, and when he spoke about life, about legacy, about God, there was a solemnity that felt like a man preparing for something he knew he could not outrun. On April 21st, 2016, he was found alone in an elevator inside Paisley Park. The official reports would say it was an accidental overdose, but the deeper truth, the one felt by those who loved his music, was simpler and sadder. He had carried the weight of genius for too long, and genius had asked for its price. The man who once commanded stages with fire left the world in silence, surrounded not by crowds but by the walls he had built to protect himself from everything that had eventually found him anyway. All the homes he built could not shelter him from the storms within. The empire he created could not hold back the loneliness that fame made invisible. And the legacy he tried so hard to shape came at a cost no one could fully understand. A cost paid in pain, in isolation, and in the quiet ache of a life lived for music more than for himself. Outside, America mourned. Inside Paisley Park, the silence felt infinite. When the world learned of his passing, it wasn't the number in his bank account that people spoke of. It wasn't the value of his estate, the rare guitars, the iconic wardrobes, or the vault rumored to contain thousands of unreleased songs. What America remembered first was how Prince made them feel, because his true legacy was never made of gold or property. It was made of echoes, emotional, cultural, spiritual, that reached far beyond the walls of Paisley Park. Still, the material legacy he left behind was staggering. His estate, valued at over $156 million, became the subject of a long and complex legal battle among his siblings. Without a will, every piece of his empire, the masters of his songs, the publishing rights, the real estate, the vault, suddenly became a puzzle no one was prepared to solve. But even as the courts untangled the numbers, fans understood what mattered more. Prince's wealth was only the surface. What lay beneath was immeasurable. Paisley Park, once his private world, transformed into a museum, not just a place, but a pilgrimage site. Fans walked through its quiet halls, past his purple motorcycle, his stage costumes, the handwritten notes that showed a mind constantly at war with time. Some cried, others stood in silence. Many whispered thanks, because understanding Prince meant understanding that art for him was not performance. It was devotion. His influence on music didn't end with his albums. Artists across generations, Beyoncé, Bruno Mars, Alicia Keys, The Weeknd, Janelle Monáe, all carried pieces of his spark. Some copied his style, others studied his fearlessness. All felt the weight of his standard: to create boldly, to innovate relentlessly, to protect one's truth with both hands. Prince didn't just inspire musicians. He liberated them. He fought for artistic freedom long before the world recognized its importance. His battles with record labels paved the way for artists today to own their masters, control their image, and choose their creative path. He was a warrior disguised in sequins, a revolutionary armed with guitars instead of slogans. Long after his death, young artists still quote him, still learn from him, still walk through doors he broke open. But the most powerful part of his legacy is the emotional inheritance he left behind. The memories encoded into millions of private lives. Couples who fell in love to adore. Teenagers who found courage in Purple Rain. People who felt less alone because When Doves Cry mirrored their heartbreak. For many, Prince wasn't a celebrity. He was a companion through life's storms. Even the songs no one has heard yet, thousands stored in his vault, have become part of his mythology. Fans imagine the masterpieces hiding behind that steel door, the experiments, the raw takes, the spiritual hymns, the unfinished stories of a genius who never stopped creating. One day, some of them may be released. Others may never see light, but their existence itself is a reminder. Prince was a river that never stopped flowing. And beyond the music, he left something gentler, quieter, a philosophy, a belief that identity is fluid, that art is sacred, that silence can be as powerful as sound, that the world has room for those who dare to be utterly themselves, even when that truth confuses or challenges others. He didn't chase immortality. He built it quietly, one note at a time. And now, years after he left this world, his legacy has settled into the heart of America like a soft, unending chord. A reminder that greatness is not measured by how long we live, but by how deeply we are felt. Outside Paisley Park, the skies often seem a deeper shade of purple during sunset. Some say it's coincidence. Others say it's memory. But for those who loved him, it is simply this, the echo of a life that refused to fade. In the quiet that followed his passing, something remarkable happened. The noise of celebrity faded, the debates dissolved, and what remained was the simple human truth of a man who had spent his life turning emotion into sound. Prince, who once seemed larger than the world itself, returned to something smaller, gentler. A memory held carefully in the hearts of those he touched. Not the superstar, not the icon, but the soul. And as the years went on, his legacy stopped belonging to the industry that tried to own him, or the courts that sifted through his estate. It became something pure, a shared inheritance carried by strangers who had never met him, yet felt as though they had known him all their lives. His music drifted through weddings, funerals, long drives, breakups, celebrations. His voice appeared in moments when people needed courage or forgiveness, or simply a reminder that beauty can rise from pain. The empire he created, the battles he fought, the brilliance he poured into the world, all of it now rests in a silence that feels strangely alive, a silence that holds echoes instead of emptiness, a silence that reminds us that some lives do not end. They continue as light scattered across time. And in that light, Prince still stands, a silhouette of fire and mystery, reminding us that legacy is not what we leave in our homes, or in our vaults, or in court documents. Legacy is what we leave in the pulse of the people who carry us forward. It is the way a nation still falls quiet when Purple Rain begins. It is the way a single guitar note can reopen memories believed long forgotten. It is the way millions can feel connected through a voice that is no longer here, yet somehow never left. From silence he rose, and in silence he remains. Not vanished, not gone, but transformed into something that cannot be lost. A final chord, a lingering color, a life that continues to shine in shades of purple.